There is a specific kind of person. You've probably met one. Maybe you are one. They laugh when most people would shut down. They stay calm when everything around them is falling apart. They see things, feel things that other people completely miss. And if you didn't know better, you might think they just don't care, that nothing gets to them. But the truth is almost the opposite. Everything gets to them. They just learned, somewhere along the way, how to carry it without collapsing under it. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened because life taught them something early, that most people spend decades trying to understand. Today we're going to talk about what that actually does to a person, not just the strength it builds, but the cost, the habits, the patterns, the things that live quietly inside someone who has simply been through too much. Think about what it means to grow up or live in an environment where safety isn't guaranteed. Not necessarily dramatic danger, sometimes it's quieter than that. A home where moods shifted without warning. A parent whose love felt conditional. A relationship where you never quite knew where you stood. A season of loss that came before you had the tools to process it. When that's your normal, your brain does something remarkable. It starts building systems, internal systems, designed for one purpose, to keep you safe. Imagine a child who grows up in a house where tension comes without warning. One evening, dinner is warm and easy. The next, there's a silence at the table that feels like a held breath. That child doesn't know the word for what they're doing, but every single day, they are running calculations, reading posture, reading tone, reading the speed of footsteps down the hall. They become, without realizing it, an expert in emotional weather. Now fast forward 20 years, that child is an adult, sitting in a meeting or on a first date or in a conversation with a friend, and they still feel it, the slight edge in someone's voice, the moment a smile doesn't quite land right, the pause before an answer that tells them more than the answer itself. The training never really stops, it just changes venues. Imagine a child who grows up in a house where tension comes without warning. One evening, dinner is warm and easy. The next, there's a silence at the table that feels like a held breath. That child doesn't know the word for what they're doing, but every single day, they are running calculations, reading posture, reading tone, reading the speed of footsteps down the hall. They become, without realizing it, an expert in emotional weather. Now fast forward 20 years, that child is an adult, sitting in a meeting or on a first date or in a conversation with a friend, and they still feel it, the slight edge in someone's voice, the moment a smile doesn't quite land right, the pause before an answer that tells them more than the answer itself. The training never really stops, it just changes venues. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, and while it sounds clinical, almost cold, what it actually means is this: your nervous system became a precision instrument, because at some point it had to be. That's not a flaw, that's adaptation. And adaptation is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. Here's something that often surprises people when they learn about it. The same experience that creates hypervigilance also creates something almost beautiful, a kind of empathy that most people never develop. Not the surface level kind, where you say, "I understand," because it seems like the right thing to say, but the deep, almost uncomfortable kind, where you feel another person's pain before they've named it. There's a woman, let's call her Nadia. She works in an office with 30 people, and there's a colleague, loud, funny, always the first one laughing. One afternoon, Nadia walks past him in the hallway and notices something almost invisible. The joke he just made landed. Everyone laughed. But his eyes didn't move the way they usually do. There was a half-second delay, a micro-flatness behind the smile. Later that day, she checks in on him. Casually, just, "Hey, you doing okay?" And he breaks, tells her his father is in the hospital, that he's been holding it together all week and nobody noticed. Nobody except Nadia, because Nadia spent years learning to read exactly that signal. The performance of, okay, she knows it intimately because she lived it herself. That's what pain does when it's processed instead of buried. It doesn't just leave a scar, it leaves a window into other people's hidden worlds. People who've been through a lot don't just hear your words, they hear your tone. They feel the weight of your silence. They notice the version of you that's trying to seem fine. And for a lot of people, that kind of being truly seen is the rarest, most meaningful thing in the world. Now let's talk about the humor, because this one confuses people. Why do people who've suffered the most often have the darkest, sharpest sense of humor? It's not denial. It's not avoidance. It's something much more deliberate than that. There's a well-known story from Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, and later wrote about the psychology of survival. He described how humor became one of the most powerful tools available to prisoners in the camps. Not big, elaborate jokes, just small, absurd observations about the brutality of the situation. Frankl wrote that even a single moment of humor was a form of resistance, a way of saying to the situation and to yourself, "You have not taken everything from me." I'm not comparing everyday hardship to that kind of horror, but the psychological mechanism is the same. When you can find something funny in a terrible moment, genuinely funny, not fake laugh funny, you are doing something cognitively remarkable. You are stepping slightly outside the experience and observing it from a distance. And that distance is everything. It doesn't erase the pain, but it shrinks it just enough to keep you from being completely swallowed by it. So the next time someone laughs at something dark, something that makes you think, how can they joke about that? Understand that the laugh is not dismissal. The laugh is survival in real time. This is where things get complicated, and honestly, this might be the most important part. People who have been through too much often become two seemingly opposite things at once: fiercely loyal and deeply guarded, incredibly giving and strangely hard to reach. They will show up for you at 3 a.m. without hesitation. Rearrange their entire day if you need them. Hold space for your pain with a patience that feels almost impossible. But ask them how they're doing, really doing. And something shifts. They deflect. They minimize. They say, "I'm fine," in a way. That sounds rehearsed, even to themselves. Think about someone who grew up learning that needing things from people came with a cost. Maybe they asked for comfort and got silence. Maybe they were vulnerable and someone used it against them. Maybe they depended on someone, completely, totally, and that person left. The nervous system remembers that. It files it under. Depending on people is dangerous. So even when love shows up, real, safe, consistent love, there's a part of them that can't fully relax into it. Not because they don't want it, but because wanting it feels like standing at the edge of something they've fallen off of before. This is not a character flaw. This is not them being difficult or cold or broken. This is a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do, protecting the person it belongs to. If you love someone like this, the most powerful thing you can do is not push them to open up faster. It's to stay, consistently, predictably, safely, and let their nervous system learn, over time, that this time, closeness doesn't have to cost something. There's an emotion that lives inside a lot of these people that almost never gets named out loud. Grief, not for someone they lost, but for who they were before. The version of themselves that trusted easily, that walked into rooms without reading the atmosphere first, that loved without calculating the exit, that slept without replaying conversations. There's a lightness to that version of a person. That can't be fully recovered once certain things have happened. And most people who've been through too much know this, quietly, privately, without ever saying it aloud. I want you to imagine two versions of the same person. Version 1 is 22 years old. They fall in love easily. They make plans without contingencies. They believe things will work out because, why wouldn't they? Version 2 is 10 years later. They still fall in love. They still make plans. But there's a background hum now. A quiet awareness of how things can unravel. A hesitation before fully committing to happiness. Because happiness has, before, been a setup. Version 2 is wiser, stronger, more capable in almost every way. But sometimes, alone, they look back at version 1 and feel something they can't quite name. It's not regret. It's not self-pity. It's grief for an innocence that was taken before they were ready to give it up. If this resonates with you, I want you to hear something important. That grief is valid. You don't have to pretend it isn't there. You don't have to perform gratitude for your growth. Every time someone says, "But look how strong you became," you can be proud of who you are now. and still mourn who you were before the hard things happened. Both are true. Both are allowed. Now, and this matters, none of what we've talked about means you are defined by what happened to you. Psychologists have a term, post-traumatic growth, and the research behind it is extraordinary. Studies by psychologist Richard Tedeschi found that a significant number of people who experience serious hardship don't just return to who they were before, they develop something new. A deeper appreciation for life's smallest moments, a clearer sense of what actually matters, closer, more meaningful relationships, and often, a sense of purpose that people who've had easy lives sometimes spend their whole lives searching for. Think about the people in your life who've been through something genuinely hard: illness, loss, betrayal, collapse. Now, think about how many of them describe a sunset differently now. How many of them say things like, "I used to rush through everything. Now I actually sit with it." That's not a cliche. That's a neurological reality. When the brain has processed genuine loss, it recalibrates what registers as beautiful. That's a neurological reality. When the brain has processed genuine loss, it recalibrates what registers as beautiful. Ordinary things, a quiet morning, a familiar laugh, a safe person, start to feel extraordinary. Not because life got better necessarily, but because the threshold for gratitude permanently lowered. This is one of the most quietly profound things that hardship can do to a person. It doesn't just teach you what to avoid, it teaches you what to protect, what to hold close, what actually deserves your energy, and what doesn't. So let me bring this back to where we started. That person who laughs at chaos, who stays calm when the world is on fire, who sees your pain before you've said a word, who shows up for everyone, but struggles to let anyone show up for them. They are not invincible. They are not unaffected. They are not just built different. They are someone who was handed too much too early and had to build something from it, because the alternative was falling apart completely. And what they built, piece by careful piece, is a kind of wisdom you cannot buy, borrow, or fast-track. Pain became insight. Chaos became calm. Isolation became empathy. Survival became, eventually, something like light. Not a perfect light, not a light without flickers or shadows, but a real one. The kind that comes from knowing the dark, personally, intimately, and choosing, despite that, to still be here. Still trying, still showing up, still, against every reason not to. Choosing hope. If that's you, I hope you know what you carry is heavier than it looks from the outside. And the fact that you're still standing is not a small thing. It never was. You can be proud of who you are now and still mourn who you were before the hard things happened.